Have you ever wondered about the strangest photos that time has forgotten? Today, we will reveal to you the strangest and most fascinating vintage photos that you will love. I promise you. Enjoy the show. Check this out. Before becoming Hollywood's famous million-dollar mermaid, Esther Williams was actually an Olympic hopeful. But when World War II canceled the 1940 Games, she dove into showbiz instead. Here's the cool part. In 1944, she visited these spars, the women of the U.S. Coast Guard, teaching them swimming techniques. Get this. These ladies were part of a brand new program that changed the game for women in uniform. Get this. Way before COVID, America faced another pandemic that had everyone masking up. The year was 1918, and this San Francisco cop wasn't playing around. Check this out. They actually fined people $5 for not wearing a mask. That's about $100 in today's cash. Picture this. Venice, 1958, and here's Sophia Loren, just 24, strolling down those iconic waterfront docks. But here's what's wild. She wasn't just another face at the film festival. Back then, Italian actresses rarely made it in Hollywood. But Sophia? She just shrugged and said, "Watch me," in that classic Italian style. And boy, did she deliver. Within 2 years, that Oscar was hers. Not bad for a girl from Pozzuoli, right? Picture this. Cronulla Beach, 1937. Australian photographer Max Dupain's about to change fashion photography forever. Here's the wild part. While everyone else was shooting stiff poses in studios, he dragged his model out to the sand dunes. Just look at those footprints leading to that perfect moment. But you know what's really crazy? This shot wasn't planned. The model was just stretching between takes when Dupain saw pure magic happening. Oh boy, just another normal day in Paris, 1969. If you're Salvador Dali, while other folks walk their poodles, this master of surrealism casually strolled with his pet anteater. Here's the kicker. He'd take this bizarre companion to the finest restaurants and art galleries. Well, if you thought your morning hair routine was intense, back in the 1920s, this beast was what passed for a hairdryer, looking like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But here's the wild part. Salons actually used these contraptions, calling them permanent wave machines. Hard times call for creative measures. During the Great Depression, dance marathons became a wild craze. And this couple just nailed it in Atlantic City. We're talking 1,473 hours of non-stop moving. That's 61 straight days, folks. Now, here's the crazy part. They weren't just dancing. They'd eat, sleep, and even shave while shuffling their feet to stay in the game. The prize money? Worth about 2 years' wages back then. Talk about passing down the family business. In this rare moment from the 1960s, Bruce Lee's teaching little Brandon his first martial arts moves. The kicker? Brandon was barely old enough to walk, but already learning to kick. Years later, he'd follow his dad's footsteps into martial arts stardom. Behind the glamour of 1930s, Hollywood, stars had their own quirky rituals. Here's Ramon Navarro and Robert Montgomery sharing a smoke in the dressing room, surrounded by what looks like a small army of riding boots. In 1883, Lady Liberty was just getting her head together, literally. Here in Paris, French craftsmen were piecing together what would become America's most famous lady. The kicker? Those tiny specks on top of her crown are actually workers. Yep, They're casually hanging out on a 151-foot-tall statue like it's no big deal. Before she'd welcome millions to New York Harbor, she was just chilling in pieces in a French courtyard. Talk about bringing home the bacon! At an 1894 costume party, this genius showed up as a life-size strip of bacon and snagged first prize. And hey, this wasn't your modern Halloween party. Victorian costume balls were serious business. Before she tangled with 007 in Live and Let Die, Madeline Smith was turning heads in British TV comedies. Here's the fun part. She landed the Bond role because of her comedic timing, not just her looks. What a combo! The guy who painted the American dream meets the man who perfected the American meal. In 1973, Norman Rockwell took a break from his Saturday Evening Post covers to paint Colonel Sanders. Here's the kicker. These two were basically selling the same thing. Good old-fashioned Americana. The Navy's weirdest boxing match ever? Spring 1918, and this Royal Navy officer's throwing hands with a fish. Jim Jones receiving a Martin Luther King Junior Humanitarian Award at Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco, January 1977. Forget modern-day selfie spots. This is Point Lookout, Tennessee in the 1880s. Some daredevil Victorian gentleman decided the perfect spot for contemplating life was right on the edge of a 1,000-foot cliff. And that cabin? Talk about extreme real estate. Meet the American Dream, a 1970s limo that took excess to a whole new level. Stretching 100 feet long, this beast had a swimming pool, king-size waterbed, and get this, a helipad. Just imagine parallel parking this bad boy. The wildest part? It needed 26 wheels just to keep its belly off the ground. Ever wanted a car that looks like a sneaker with headlights? Meet the 1944 Doodlebug. Looking like something straight out of a cartoon, this adorable oddball could cruise for 70 miles on a single gallon. Pretty impressive for the 1940s. The wild part? It only had 10 horsepower, but still hit 45 miles per hour. Mother Nature's first autograph? Back in 1882, photographer William Jennings pulled off what many thought impossible, catching lightning on camera. The crazy part? He wasn't even sure it would work. FaceTime in 1964? You bet. While we were still watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, Japan was already video chatting with Toshiba's Viewphone. Here's the wild part. This wasn't just a concept, it actually worked. A dramatic snapshot from the 1985 cult classic Clue, showcasing vintage mystery and style. Hanging out with gargoyles in 1865? Just another day at Notre Dame. These stone guardians were more than just scary faces. They were medieval France's most stylish rain gutters. And that guy? He's probably the luckiest photographer's assistant ever, casually chilling with creatures that most folks only saw from 200 feet below. Ah, Paris in the 1950s, when fashion had more swing than a jazz club. These matching polka dot skirts weren't just clothing, they were weapons of mass distraction. The wild part? Those petticoats underneath needed more engineering than the Eiffel Tower behind them. The wildest beauty pageant ever? Welcome to the 1930s Florida, where contestants had to wear masks to judge their eyes alone. Depression-era entertainment was something else. Here's Thora Yeager in 1931, literally becoming human bacon in a giant skillet. The kicker? She strapped real bacon to her feet and skated around this massive pan for crowds of amazed onlookers. Who needs Netflix when you got a giant frying pan and a dream? Ladies and gentlemen, meet Lubber, the 1930s horse that made Clydesdales look like ponies. Weighing in at a whopping 3,000 pounds, this big boy was basically a barn with legs. Here's the wild part. He was so massive that his horseshoes could double as serving platters. When folks say they don't make them like they used to, this is probably what they mean. Talk about the ultimate art world scandal. In 1911, when the Mona Lisa vanished from the Louvre, guess who made the suspect list? Pablo Picasso himself. The wild part? Our Cubist friend had previously bought stolen artwork from the Louvre, so the cops thought he might have gone for the ultimate upgrade. Turns out he was innocent. Just a case of wrong artist, wrong time. Spoiler alert, Lisa turned up 2 years later, stolen by a handyman who thought she'd look better in his apartment. Welcome to the 1970s soda aisle, where every kid was a beverage archaeologist. Those glass bottles weren't just containers, they were treasures waiting to be discovered. The wild part? No plastic in sight, just rows of gleaming glass soldiers standing at attention. $2 could get you enough bottles to feel like a soft drink tycoon. Remember that satisfying pop when you opened one? Howard Carter's ultimate treasure hunt paid off in 1922 when he struck ancient Egyptian gold, literally. Inside this wooden shrine, these servant statues were ready to serve King Tut in the afterlife. The wild part, after 3,000 years sealed away, these guys still had their original paint job. Every archaeologist dreams of finding an untouched tomb, but Carter hit the ancient jackpot. Everything from golden chariots to these priceless wooden servants, just waiting in the dark for someone to find them. The miniskirt revolution hits the streets of New York. You're looking at the moment when hemlines went up and eyebrows went even higher. These brave fashionistas are rocking those iconic 70s minis, while the older generation does their best not looking, but totally looking routine. Suddenly, Grandpa's newspaper becomes the most interesting thing in the world. Just another day in the cultural shakeup of 1970s Manhattan, where fashion wars were fought 1 inch of fabric at a time. Long before he became Hollywood's favorite tough guy, here's Danny Trejo, looking like a romantic lead. The year's 1976, and that mustache was probably the scariest thing about him. Standing with his wife Joanne, you'd never guess this gentle-looking hippie would become Machete himself. Before there were Ubers, New York had its own 4-legged transit system. In 1917, these horse-drawn streetcars were about to become extinct, thanks to those newfangled electric trolleys. Here at Bleecker and Broadway, you're looking at the last gasp of the original horsepower. These trusty steeds pulled millions of New Yorkers through rain, shine, and probably a few choice Manhattan traffic jams. Talk about organic transportation, zero emissions, but plenty of other street deposits.